Mini episode 1295 of the FDH Lounge is brought to you by Sportsology, delivering unconventional columns and webcasts about sports, TV, music, movies, and more. Follow them on the web at sportsology.com.
The FDH Lounge. You'll want to schedule your life around it.
A long time ago, on a gloomy, wet Cleveland spring night, two men stand alone amidst the late-night drizzle. Their voices echo across the vacant station parking lot as they debate the merits of the great American radio show that have been missing for far too long. On that night, an idea was born. That idea became the FDH Lounge. Welcome to the FDH Lounge.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to FDH Lounge, mini episode 1295. This is FDH Managing Partner Rick Morris here, and it is a special treat, as always, to get back on the show. A longtime friend of ours, the editor of ePolitics.com, Colin Delany, and, of course, also a columnist for campaigns and elections, among the many other things he does in the political world. We'll be talking about that as well. We're going to be looking at the lead-up here, the stretch run in the 2020 presidential campaign. When last we left off with Colin, a couple months back, it was just pre-convention time here, and we talked about this wild and wacky, unprecedented presidential campaign up to that point. We're going to take the remaining chapters here. We are recording this pretty close to Election Eve, so we'll be talking about everything end of August into September into October, the many October surprises, all the things that have happened since then. And Colin, I will just say this. We left it off and we said, we know there's going to be a lot of wacky crap the rest of the way. It is 2020 after all. I don't know that we could have forecast the exact nature of anything in the last 90 days plus.
Yeah, it would have been tough. It has been the sheer density of things. I mean, there have been weeks where you would have, events that in a normal year would have shaped the future trajectory of the race, right?
Yeah.
You've had like 5 or 6 of them in a week, and by Friday, you barely remember what happened on Monday, right?
Yep.
But that's been the process. And, the conventions obviously did what they did. That first debate we can talk about if you like. Yep. I think in some ways that first debate was decisive. But through it all, there's been this underlying line of Trump's supporters staying exactly where they are, and then the gradual trend being toward Biden through that whole period.
No, I agree with what you're saying there. And I think, I want to get to certainly all of that. It has been very interesting. The first debate, of course, taking place on America's North Coast here, right in the greater Cleveland area where I am located. And with that may have come perhaps a little bit of a super spreader as a part of this, extra little bonus with getting a presidential debate here. So we have all of that to get to. But before we do, there was some stuff you were talking about off air here, and as I say, your burgeoning resume as we continue to go along, Colin, going far and wide beyond being a regular guest with us and editor of ePolitics.com, as great as that is, author of several publications here, some work that you're doing during this race as well, which is definitely worth talking about.
I'll tell you what, man, I have had a rare opportunity in life. I got to find out whether I knew what I was talking about.
Okay.
I've been in politics. I've been in digital politics for a long time, but almost always on the advocacy side. And then I've written about the political side for years. But this year, for the last couple of months, I've been, over my head in the mechanics of digital campaigning these days, specifically using advertising. So I've been working on a bunch of different projects, but 2 of them have involved videos made by actors, musicians who grew up in particular state legislative districts, and they're making videos aimed at their hometowns, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we're using digital advertising to put them in front of the voters in those hometowns.
Okay.
And these are completely above board that we're vendors for two state parties, right? We're on FEC form.
Right.
But it's let me really see the mechanics of how digital campaigning is done, at least on, the communications and advertising side. And, I have a few edits I'll make to the book, But I think I got through it okay. Yeah.
Very good.
I've still got some work to do. But there was a huge day on Monday. Facebook had put in place a ban on new political ads after midnight Pacific time Monday, right? So everybody was scrambling to get them in at the last minute.
Okay.
And so, like, for my generation of digital campaigners, that will be a defining moment for us. Where were you in the great Facebook rush of 2020?
That's right.
So, yeah, it's been a blast. And it's absolutely fascinating to get to work with a lot of really talented political professionals. It's given me a different glimpse than I had before into the profession of doing political campaigning. Yeah. So, anyway, I'll tell you, if the Democrats don't win back, a lot of these state districts, it won't be for lack of trying, you and I've talked about this before. One of the things that I've fault Obama for is not really paying very much attention at all to what was going on in the states, right?
Right.
And Democrats lost hundreds of state legislative seats. Republicans controlled redistricting in 2010, all that.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of groups on the Democratic side, some independent and others, party affiliated, have been working really hard to try to win back a lot of these districts. And we'll see if it works. We've talked about redistricting before. In states where the Republicans have full control, they have shown no signs that shame is going to, keep them within the traditional bounds of how bad you screw over the other side, right? And the Roberts Court has said that the federal courts won't step in on redistricting. So for the Democrats, it's like if you don't grab a handful of state legislative bodies, you risk being frozen out of state politics, as Democrats are in Wisconsin, where they won just a hair under 50% of the votes to the state legislature, but the Republicans have 2/3 of the seats, right? That's being frozen out, unfairly. So, I as a Democrat and someone who has worked a lot at the state level, I hope that this works out. But at least for this cycle, the Democrats have tried.
Well, as a paleocon, as I've often said, I expect my public policy ideas to suffer in the mix. But there's always winners and losers in life.
You never know.
Well,
you never know.
Hey, man,
you never know what you might find out.
I'm philosophical, Colin. For every winner, there's a loser, and vice versa. I will say this: I'm so.
My friend.
Well, I'm so.
Politics is the art of the possible.
Exactly.
It doesn't have to be a zero. It does not have to be a zero-sum game.
It just usually is, though. But
that's true.
Well, I mean, I'll say this. I'm so glad you brought this up. I like to think that's the kind of thing that separates this show from some other programming out there, because nobody's talking about redistricting, and it's a very important underlying aspect of this election all throughout the 2020s. This is going to determine how state legislature lines are drawn, the federal legislative lines, etc. It's of paramount importance, and I think you're right. Democrats are eating the Republicans' lunch here, reversing the gains the Republicans have made over the last 20 to 30 years, and I think we're going to see that play out. And as such, I fully expect that those who have been defending gerrymandering will decry it, and those who have been decrying gerrymandering will defend it. So that's how these things go.
No, actually, I think there is a very strong sentiment. Now, what individual state legislatures do is a different question, right?
Right.
But within, sort of the public discussion around the issue, there's this really strong sense that if Democrats act as crassly as Republicans do, they lose any ability to ever get out of this trap, right?
Right.
Because ultimately what you want is for redistricting to go to independent commissions.
Sure.
It's just, frankly, I think we may have talked about this another episode, but it actually is a technological question. When I worked a redistricting session in the Texas legislature in '93, it took a couple of days to model out sets of districts. We would wait to get these big paper maps that we'd unroll on the desk to see what the lines would be. And nowadays they can do that in milliseconds, right? so they can slice and dice these districts. I'll give you an example. I was doing ad targeting for some district level targeting stuff in Ohio, and it was so gerrymandered that the geographic. I was looking at the files that the Facebook was using to target these things, and the shapes were ridiculously complicated. You can tell the gerrymandering just by looking at how hard it is to target people there, right?
Oh, yeah.
Because they're not in compact groups, right? These district tentacles, pointing out in all different directions.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah. So it is partly a technological problem. So, like, the ability to make mischief, right, in the old days was limited by the technology you had to draw maps, right? And nowadays, the potential for mischief it's become unlimited. Yeah. So I think it's time that you have to take the mischief out of the process.
I would agree with that. And again, I for many years in Ohio, my congresswoman was Marcy Kaptur of the Toledo area, and as of course I mentioned, I live in the greater Cleveland area, and I always used to joke about this, that they drew the line so it was basically 5 yards from the shore, and when we had high tide, we would be separated by Lake Erie. I mean, Colin, that's how ridiculous it was.
Well, you saw some of those districts that were trying to connect black neighborhoods in Durham and Greensboro, where the districts basically just followed the interstates. It was like the interstate and the median. Yeah.
Right. Well, they did that in northeastern Ohio. The woman, Marcia Fudge, she represents the east side. It goes down to Akron, and it's probably just the width of I-77 going down to Akron.
Yeah, so. And that's just not. That's just not cool. Yeah, and again, who knows? Because the main one thing, the dirty little secret of redistricting is one reason it is an inherently political process is that. Where you draw the lines determines who stays in their seat, right?
Yep.
If the lines have to change, and it's like after that redistricting session, the Democrats kind of got screwed, of course, back in '93. Probably conservatives took over Texas, but basically you'd have 2 Democratic Congress members from the same district. I think they may have done something similar. The Maryland Democrats said were really bad too.
Right.
And this is something we got not doing yet. Right. I think they put 2 Republican incumbents into the same district.
Yeah.
After the 2010 cycle. And of course, eventually, population is going to shift and all that. But this is the kind of thing where we're all a lot better off if we just give it over some judges. I
would agree with that. And again, in looking at this here, I'm struggling to find a segue from that to the presidential talk, but I think I got one here. Marcia Fudge, if I remember correctly, and I think I do, Marcia Fudge's district includes the Cleveland Clinic, which was the site of the first presidential debate. Colin, I could pull these out of my ass all day. I'm just that damn good at segues.
Wow, that's an impressive read. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
I'd love to see your jump shot.
Well, that event there, it's really interesting because 40 years ago, of course, we had one of the most famous presidential moments, debate moments in history with Reagan and Carter, and Reagan trotting out, "Are you better off now than you were 4 years ago?" which was basically the final nail in Carter's coffin. And I was almost expecting Joe Biden to go with that, but we live in such a bifurcated economy right now. There are a lot of people actually that the pandemic is not hitting, so I guess his camp probably figured that was maybe a little bit risky. But nevertheless, it was a thing where it's a debate that we will never forget because it was basically dictated, the entire style and terms of it, by Trump. And of course, the fact that he didn't do that in the second debate. Of course, that was supposed to be the third one, but we missed the second one because of his coronavirus. We'll get to that subsequently. But again, the biggest debacle as far as, I would say, an international embarrassment as far as debates go in history. And by the way, too, I mean, there is a whole thing before we get completely one-sided on this whole thing here of, Biden calling him a clown back and some stuff like that. So, I mean, it's not like there wasn't, I don't think I'm engaging in both siderism to point that out, but it was dictated by Trump. I freely admit that as a Joe Jorgensen voter, now officially a Joe Jorgensen voter, having submitted my ballot. But, I mean, Colin, that was... We were expecting something weird and wild. I don't know that anybody quite anticipated anything like that. It was unprecedented.
Well, to me, obviously, yes, it was frankly an insane performance, right?
Yeah.
But to me, it illustrated a couple of different things, besides all the obvious points. Yeah. One, what a bubble Trump lived in, right?
Yeah.
He speaks in weird Fox News code,
right?
Oh, in the last debate it was AOC plus 3, right?
Right.
Middle America does not know what you mean by that,
right?
But also just the thought that you're surrounded by people who would let you think that this is what you do when you get up on stage like that, right? That this is the thing that will appeal to people who are on the fence. You know what I mean?
Right.
And then, and I heard a couple of people on the media say this, or, read it the next day. It was Trump unfiltered. And in some ways, when the media, especially when when video covers Trump, right, they're going to cut it down, right?
Right.
So you'll see the most outrageous thing, but you won't see the 10 minutes of sheer madness that surrounded it,
Right.
And so America got to see Trump unfiltered. And, another great line I saw the next day was, or heard that night was, every woman in America has an ex-husband or an ex-boyfriend like that.
Yeah.
Right? Like, when women, who gave you a chance last time, largely white women, both college educated and non, right?
Yeah.
This is not a performance that's this is, my thought the next day was, how could anybody want 4 more years of that, right? It's just like, you want to go back to a very peaceful time. And I remember saying at the very beginning, back in 2007, that I thought people would go to Biden after the Trump time, just because Trump has so unsettled everyone. And then followed so soon, of course, by the coronavirus, striking Trump himself.
Yes.
And I think, except for Trump loyalists, the collective American response was, yeah, what do you think was going to happen?
Well, I mean, of all the things...
Off petard.
Yeah, we've seen so many things turned on their head in this election cycle, and one of them is, and you go back throughout the history of presidential ailments and everything like that, this is the first time that the president was an inpatient patient at a hospital in 33 years since, 39 years since Reagan had been shot. And normally, there's a sympathy bump. If anything, it went the other way. I mean, for Trump that's almost unprecedented, that the president is gravely ill, and I believe he was for a period of time there. And people were just, that first weekend, I don't know that anybody was, pointing and laughing until the Secret Service drive around, at which point that sort of took the lid off of it. And again, it is something where unless you are, and I still have friends who are, again, dead enders on this thing here, okay? Unless you're one of the dead enders, you have to regard that as a revolting kind of a thing, because here's the thing, Colin, and I know this is the kind of thing that pisses off my friends and everything else like that, is that I don't engage in hypocrisy. And I will say this, that one of the things that back when conservatives, or alleged conservatives anyways, like to hold up George W. Bush as an example, which I never really got at the time. But anyways, it was his reverence of the Secret Service as opposed to, Hillary threw a lamp at the Secret Service, but George W. Bush treated him like gold. Used to be Republicans cared about respecting the Secret Service, and now Again, it's like everything else in this election cycle where it's FU for talking about it. Whether it's the coronavirus or this or that or whatever, everything is so, bifurcated as far as what people believe. It's not even pushing back on it being true. It's FU for talking about it.
Oh, God, I just saw today that Ben Carson was doing a campaign event. Mike Pompeo's been doing campaign events.
Yeah.
We're paying for their protection. We're paying for all of this. Taxpayers have paid over $8 million, I think was the post estimate the other day, into Trump properties. It just boggles my mind that such petty grifters, got in charge here. Yeah. But yes, you have to be noble to feel noblesse oblige, right?
Mm-hmm.
Somebody like Bush, somebody like Obama, they were very socially aware and gracious people, I heard catty things about the Obamas from a co-worker whose husband was in the Secret Service. Staff's always going to, complain. So
right.
You always got to keep that, grain of salt on that one.
Right.
But Trump has no shred of nobility. You know what I mean?
Right.
He is nothing but petty. And so the only relationships that exist for him are, you're either, you're subordinate to him, basically. And he has to demonstrate that at every opportunity. It is all power for him.
Sure. And he is he's continued to have, super spreader events across the country, things where I just wince as I see them out there. I even had one of my college friends went to one of the ones downstate, and I was very concerned for him. And I don't know that he's out of the woods yet because it was still a couple of days ago that he went to it. But it's just one of these things where, it's been such a blur, as we said, this fall here. The VP debate where not much happened except, if you believe the memes on Twitter, I guess Jimmy Superfly Snuckle landed on Mike Pence's head at one point. So I did see that.
I do believe that fly is true American hero. Mike Pence, I just want to get that. I'm glad you brought him up. I do want to say about Mike Pence, what an odd character, right?
True.
Can't be alone with a person of the opposite sex.
Right.
All other personal quirks, whatever. But when he was on that, on the debate on the screen, it was as though he was a simulation trying to play at being a reassuring leader, like a reassuring human almost. He almost feels slightly animatronic, and I've never been able to figure out what it is. But he was about to be voted out in Indiana. When he became vice president, right. I don't think he is much of a threat for 2024. Let's put it that way.
Probably not. And again, this thing about him and other women, nobody ever told him. Apparently, that's no way to keep your pimp hand strong. Mike Pence is not being alone with other women.
Yeah, well, it revealed a very medieval mindset. You're like, grow up, dude. Yeah.
Well, he's one of these guys that calls his wife mommy, I think. So, it is what it is.
I believe he calls her mother.
Or mother. Yeah.
Although I will say, among, because I'm from the South, among the older, more country folks that I knew, that was not that uncommon.
Okay. Well, I mean,
it's more of an old country thing, I think.
I'm a suburban guy from the north. I find it weird, but it's, to each his own. To each his own, I guess. I don't know.
No, I hear you.
I'm not a big Pence guy because I think he's not shown much of a backbone. And I'm talking prior to the Trump administration. I have issues with him prior to the Trump administration. But anyways, the other thing here during the campaign that we did not expect, and this is the one thing where I think there are bright, clean lines as far as something you didn't like and something I really liked. The good old notorious ACB on the Supreme Court here, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, rest in peace. But we got a good justice on there. In my estimation, one of three. I'm one of these guys who, again, it wasn't enough to get me to vote for Trump, but the things you don't like about what's happened in the judiciary the last 4 years, I do. There is an originalist now on the Supreme Court. Yeah. It was hardball to get it through. And by the way, I said in 2016, Marlon, this would have been the true test of how good Mitch McConnell is. I wanted him to have a vote, and I wanted him to be voted down. But that would have taken discipline but whatever, because I knew this is going to come back to bite you in the ass. It hasn't yet. They got her through, but the hypocrisy may yet play out in terms of electoral consequences. The senators that voted for her in a couple cases, McSally and Gardner, whatever, they're dead people walking anyways, I guess, so it almost doesn't matter. But, that's like I said, that's something where even if you're somebody on the right who's not a big fan of Trump's, you were happy about the outcome of it. Not happy to see somebody die, but hey, I like the court better now than I did 60 days ago, and I'm sure that's not the case with you.
They have sown the winds, and thus they shall reap the whirlwind. Now, this takes us again out of the norms of American politics in a fundamental way. The Republicans have no moral standing anymore to oppose any, just judicial-related matter. We need to find it. It's like redistricting. We need to find a way to get the politics out of it. It's basically going back to, I believe it was Abe Fortas, who got, forks before fork back in, 68. This has become a politicized process.
Right.
And what Mitch McConnell did, certainly within his power to do. I just think that they are digging their own political grave. And I don't mean it necessarily electoral in the short run. The polarization baked into the system demographically and electoral college. Basically the way the states are made up.
Right.
The Senate is conservative and white, but a minority of the country, conservative white people, cannot impose their will on a majority of the country for very long without people changing the system, right?
Well,
yeah. Why is Amy Coney Barrett on the Supreme Court? Because California has 2 senators. Because I have none, right?
Right.
That's the only reason Amy Coney Barrett. I think 15% of Americans voted for the senators who are, who determined for that. Mitch McConnell, on the way out the door, is trying to entrench minority rule. That's what he's trying to do. They're trying to get a court in there that will allow them to restrict the franchise, make it harder for people to vote, allow redistricting, allow unlimited corporate money, and allow a minority of the country to govern this country, and it simply won't last.
Well, I tell you what.
I don't look. You may be sanguine now, but I tell you what, man. This is an action that will have consequences that will reverberate for a long time. Well,
much like when Harry Reid got rid of the judicial filibuster in 2013, that started this down the road ultimately.
No. That's a load. That really is just a complete load.
Well,
that's
first time judicial filibusters were ever.
The Republicans had started filibustering these judicial nominees. They started jamming up these judicial nominees
in
a way that nobody had ever done. They were violating the norms of the system, right? For pure short-term political power, right? I mean, what else are they doing?
Yeah, so, that was.
But Mitch McConnell has been able to put this veneer of self-righteousness. Oh, we're just bullshit. Sorry.
Well, no, that's fine. That's fine. And listen, this will make a good standalone segment maybe in 2021. Let's revisit, because I'm going to throw this out there, and I'll give you some time to seethe over this until we record on this subsequently. I agree with Mike Lee. We're not a democracy. We're a constitutional republic, and we're better off for it. I agree with Mike Lee. I think democracy is just another word for mob rule and for the ability to take away the rights of the minority. I'm glad we're a constitutional republic. I do see that being stripped in the next couple of years, and I don't regard that as a great thing. But
we're not going to strip away being a constitutional republic. We will make, people on my side will do our best to make it a more representative. But listen, white people who live in Iowa don't get to determine policy for California forever. I'm just saying.
Well, Colin, you guys are the ones.
I am a Democrat. If everyone was legally required to vote, I would be extremely happy.
But Colin, people like me believe in federalism. I don't believe people from California should be telling me how to live, and yet when you guys wanted to nationalize everything, these are the consequences of it. You live by the sword, you die by the sword.
Democrats didn't nationalize everything.
And with the New Deal.
A national and global economy emerged. There is no part of this world that did not create some kind of regulatory structure to handle the fact that we're not all riding horses anymore.
Well,
right? It's called modernity.
Well, that's a nice tease for a segment subsequently here.
We'll do that later.
We'll put a pin in that one. Our next one will be just going through predictions here. I have mine, and we'll see if you agree or disagree. But for right now, this has been mini episode 1295. A pleasure, Colin Delany. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for checking this one out.